On the 4th of March 2019, I wrote the following and posted it across my social media accounts. There's some stuff I need to get off of my chest. When better than now. I'm not happy with myself. No, I'm not happy as myself. I'm not sure I ever have been. I've been really good at hiding it sometimes, even from myself at times. In particular, I'm not happy with my masculinity, and if you know me, that might seem like a joke. Masculinity? What masculinity? Turns out, I've been making subconscious efforts to distance myself from testosterone-driven masculinity for probably my whole life. Now, why might I have been doing that? In the past few months, some things clicked in me, and I've made some drastic realisations about myself. In that time, I've been struggling internally with who I am and who I want to be. But there's one question I keep coming back to. Do I want to live the rest of my life as a man? The answer to this supersedes any of the little questions, the doubts and fears trying to drag me back into the closet. So, yeah, this is me coming out as trans. I don't know where to go from here, but this seems like the first step to me, after many, many years, an admittance of how I feel outside of my own head. It's so weird looking back at my old writing when I was first working things out. It's fair to say my understanding of how I relate to the concept of gender has grown massively since then. But I was getting there, slowly, in my own time. Ever since that day, my life has been something of a roller coaster, a wild theme park extravaganza of emotional highs and lows. But every single moment of it, good and bad, I felt more like I actually exist than I ever did before coming out. I'm getting ahead of myself, though. Hi, I'm Evie, and this is the story of my transition, a tale almost all expose of what it's like to start exploring your gender in your late 20s, how it has affected me and my relationships with the people around me, the joys, the sorrows and everything in between. Strap in kids, enjoy the ride. It's trans time! I am a single floating point in space. An infinite void separates me from the entirety of the existence outside of myself. To be anything but me is an impossible, unreachable goal. Every change in my state forces change to the space around me, forces change onto all other existences floating in space. To exist in the vacuum is to exist as part of an absolute whole. There is no such thing as a change in isolation. All change contributes to a greater shift in the universe. My reality, in part, determines all of our shared realities. As much as I may influence it, I may never inhabit another's reality. I am trapped within my own reality, unable to break the confines of self. None of this actually matters. We are all just dust that stumbled into conscious thought and has learned how to look inwards as itself. Soon we will lose the ability to look and become nothing but dust once more. Dust is inconsequential. Consequence is a construct designed to give us meaning. Meaning is inferred, never implicit. Certainly, Since the day I was born, I have existed. I have been an inarguable presence in this world. My being has had a permanent and noticeable bearing on the paths being trod by other people. My friends, my family, even a person I bumped into in the street, their lives were all shifted in the most subtle of ways by my presence. It's like sliding doors. You remember sliding doors. I'm the door. My existence is and always has been irrefutable to the people around me. So when I say that I only feel like I've existed in the past few years, what do I mean? When I look back at what I remember of my childhood, my teen years and my early 20s, I have a severe disconnect to those memories. It's more like just watching a movie. Yes, I can get emotionally invested as the meteor Tiamat falls on Itamori, but I know in my heart that is something that happened to somebody else. Somebody who is fundamentally not who I am today. Oh, a side note, if that reference is lost on you, don't worry, we'll be coming back to the cinematic masterpiece of Your Name in the near future. My existence, from my own perspective, is split into two separate entities. A duality, if you will, of mind and of body. I'd like to take this moment to name this groundbreaking way of looking at the world twoism. My body a vessel full of mind, the true me, a me that spent decades buried under self-doubt and social conditioning, never given the opportunity to come to the surface. I lay dormant for 26 numb, detached years, and then I gave myself the chance to take full control of who I am and of my life. Then I could start my journey. It's time to talk about Celeste. Right, so have you all ever played Celeste, actually? I'm going to assume you haven't, but if you have, just enjoy me fangirling, non-binarying? Fan-being? Enjoy me fan-being over it for a while. So, Celeste is a game about climbing a mountain. It's a game about overcoming difficulties. It's a game about persistence in the face of adversity. Celeste is a game about reconciling with every part of yourself, even the parts you think were put there to hurt you. Celeste is... it's about the journey. And it's an absolute masterpiece of a game. Right, so... I climbed a mountain because of my love for Celeste. Like, a literal whole mountain. Me. I can't even get out of bed most days. And this game, this beautiful work of art, it gave me the willpower to climb 10,000 feet, just to see what that would feel like. That's how good this game is. Released in 2018, Celeste is Maddie Thorson's second major game release after Towerfall. In it, you play as Madeline. It's Madeline. A young woman who decides that she needs to conquer her inner demons and rediscover her self-esteem by reaching the peak of Mount Celeste. The gameplay features some punishingly hard platforming, and a game mechanic through which your hair changes colour to allow you to reach new heights. This is low-key one of the most true-to-life transfemme experiences ever committed to media, if you ask me. Our protagonist is visited throughout the game by a manifestation of her anxiety and depression called Madeline. Madeline is a presence that seems bent on stopping her in her tracks and preventing her from climbing any further. Over time, however, Madeline learns to work with the Madeline side of herself, drawing from the strength of everything she is to literally ascend and become a better version of herself than she ever thought was possible. It's beautiful. Okay? It's just beautiful. The gameplay, whilst challenging, puts an emphasis on self-improvement through persistence. The only way to achieve your goals is by staying the course. The game is divided into levels, and these levels into short screens, most taking no more than 10 seconds to complete. Failure to complete a screen, which will happen many times, will only ever take you back to the start of that screen. It's a low-risk, high-reward gameplay that pushes the player to keep up particularly punishing screens for that sweet, sweet endorphin rush of achievement. Celeste, like life, is about the journey as much as it is the destination, embracing the peaks and the valleys and everything you learn in between them. It's also a fantastic metaphor for existence as a trans person, and the discovery of exploring gender identity. In a 2020 Medium post, Maddie Thorson wrote the following.
Is Madeline canonically trans? Well, yeah, of course she is. This feels painfully obvious to a lot of mostly trans people, and likewise it feels painfully obvious to me too in retrospect. It has also become painfully obvious to me that I, myself, am trans. But these are things that I was not aware of during the development of Celeste, where I was writing Madeline and speaking from her perspective. Creating Celeste with my friends helped me reach the point where I could realise this truth about myself. During Celeste's development, I did not know that Madeline or myself were trans. During the Farewell DLC's development, I began to form a hunch. Post-development, I now know that we both are.
This is the thing that most endears me to Celeste. I first played the game in late 2018, shortly before starting to figure out all things trans for myself. Maddie's own subconscious self-discovery throughout its development is what breathes so much character into its world. There's this palpable feeling of striving towards a destination, towards a resting point where you can look back, see what you went through, and know how unbelievably valuable the progress that you have made is. I have played through Celeste every year since 2018. Every time I do, I find myself in a different place in my life, with my perspective of myself and the world around me changed. The view from the peak of Mount Celeste ever changing. What do you remember of me first coming out as trans, and what were your feelings about it at the time?
If you remember, you were up here for a birthday thing, and I can't think how old you were. It would have been, well, I remember many years ago, 4 years ago, 4 years ago, and I was driving you back, and we were, do you remember this, having a conversation in the car, and I said about a Facebook thing I'd seen of yours where you were asking for donations to a particular charity.
Yeah.
And it was an LGBTQ charity, and I just asked why you chose that charity, and you said because you identified with one of them. At the time, still didn't know which one, so I said, oh, okay, and I'm racking through my brain thinking, LGBTQ, okay, well, which one of those? And you said it was the T, and of course I'm then thinking T, oh, transgender, okay. If you remember, I was driving, so I'm trying to keep the car straight. So that's when I first heard about you saying you identified with trans more than anything else. And what were my thoughts on it? I just thought, okay, that makes sense. It made sense because you know the history with yourself, where we've been since you were 14, 15. You had a gay partner, and then you had a straight partner, and then the next stage is, okay, fine. You're trying to find your identity, trying to find where you sat, and it kind of made sense.
It's difficult to say exactly how and when I first became aware of my queer identity. I think there's a part of me that always knew I wasn't cisgender. The clues were always there, but it was something I never had the vocabulary, education, or sense of self-worth to work through as a child or a teenager. This is something for which I blame the quintessentially British mix of growing up in the shadow of Maggie Milkstealer Thatcher's Section 28 and the widespread commercial success of outrageously transphobic comedy like Little Britain, in which a man thinking he was a woman was the height of hilarity. The upshot of all this was that I wrote off a lot of my feelings about gender as things that were not worth dealing with, even when I knew things weren't quite right. Over time, and throughout my 20s, I constructed a version of myself that was happy with settling into the status quo. I had found somebody I loved, and as awful as it sounds to me in hindsight, I didn't care enough about myself to start rocking the boat.
But that all changed when the Fire Nation attacked.
And when I say the Fire Nation attacked, I of course mean that I was engaged to be married, and then I suddenly realised that I was setting a permanent course for my life, in which I was putting myself second in a really major way, and I may never be truly happy if I didn't do something about it. We broke up. It was awful. I was alone, everybody was heartbroken. I spent a long time hating myself for hurting my ex, and wondering if I'd made the right decision. Those were the darkest of dark days for me. I found myself suddenly with a huge hole in my life. I was left with no guidance for who I should be, and so I found myself for the first time in a long time having to look inwards at myself and truly ask who I wanted to be for my own benefit.
I wanted to mention the film Your Name to you. I don't know if you remember, but you lent me a DVD of Your Name to watch. It was shortly after I'd come out of a long-term relationship, and I was in quite a dark and lost place in my life, I feel it's fair to say. And watching that film unlocked something inside me, and sounds weird, but it gave me permission within myself to actually start exploring my gender identity. So I just wanted to thank you for that, really. I don't know if it was your intention when you gave me the DVD. I don't believe it was. If you were somehow able to recognize something in me I was yet to admit to myself. But at the time, it truly felt like you had just handed me a way to answer a question I didn't know I was asking.
Wow, I was really excited to hear you mention Your Name, and I'm amazed that it is a part of your story and thrilled that it's a part of your story. Makoto Shinkai has been making films for a while, and one of his earlier films definitely inspired decisions made in my life as well. So the fact that Your Name has had an impact on your life is really exciting for me. And I'd love to say that I had some grand machinations there, but that was either luck or divine intervention. I just wanted to show you a beautiful film that, that I thought would be nice to watch.
Your Name is a 2016 coming-of-age body-swap animated movie by actual god amongst anime-creating men, Makoto Shinkai. It's also the piece of media I would most attribute to cracking my egg and putting me on the path to who I am today. The film's plot revolves around the lives of our two main characters, Mitsuo Miyamitsu and Taki Tachibana, two high school students who live in rural Utomi and Tokyo, respectively. The two switch bodies intermittently, a state triggered by sleep, and start having to live out their day-to-day lives navigating the intricacies of each other's existences. Over time, a bond is formed between the two, a connection that defies time and physical space. There's also an overarching plot about a comet, but I don't want to spoil that for you. Look, this film is beautiful and heartbreaking and poetry and everything that good art should be. Stop this video right now and go watch it. Then come back so we can soak in its glory together. It's important to say at this point that Your Name isn't an explicit trans allegory, and as with any trans reading of a non-trans text, there are elements of the story and presentation that do not fit into a trans narrative. But the parts that do, whew, boy how they do. Some of this is inherent to a boy-girl body swap story, but other things are just done with such a pinpoint sniper accuracy to hit you right in the gender feels. The growing feeling of connection and correctness to a body and a life that you never had a chance to experience before. Navigating the expectations of being a gender you were never socially trained to be. Oh, and check out these translated lyrics from the song that plays during the film's climactic moments. Time has come. The past is just a preface. You can skip through, 'cause I start here. There's a moment in the film where Taki loses their connection to Mitsuha, where they feel it's gone forever, that they'll never get to see life through Mitsuha's eyes again, that entire aspect of their life is gone, buried, lost to time. But then they wake up in Mitsuha's bed, in Mitsuha's body, and all they can do is hold on to themselves with everything they have and just cry.
This broke me.
Okay, I put in a "this broke me" meme there, because on one level, this scene did break me. Emotionally, it did something that no film had ever done before. I was bawling, and I did not stop. I spent the rest of this film watching through a veil of tears. On another level, though, these precious, perfect few seconds of an animated film, they didn't break me. They fixed me. I wouldn't fully understand it for a good few months afterwards, but subconsciously, this was a moment where I realised that I knew. I knew deep down what I had to do. I knew what I'd been searching for in life, what I'd been ignoring. I knew the reason I'd been disconnected, distant from my own reality. This was, almost imperceptibly, when I realised I was trans. I couldn't admit it yet. Not even to myself, but the wheels were in motion. The train had left the station, my journey had begun. The comet was already on a collision course. The curtain was rising, and it was finally time to take my place in the spotlight.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome Evie?
The hunt is on, the hounds unleashed. They are coming after me. The hunt is on, the hounds unleashed. They are coming after me.
The moment that really kind of made me see you as you, I think, was watching you perform your poetry at the Welly, at their poetry night, and you blew my socks off. You know, that was wonderful to see you be you, and you say things that mattered to an audience that responded. You really connected to them, and it wasn't necessarily just people who you'd expect to go, oh yeah, that speaks to me. There were all kinds of people in that pub who heard your poetry, who heard your transformative words and were moved by it, you know? And that was a moment that I was so proud of you and so amazed by the point you've reached so far, and so curious to see what will go next.
Gender is performance. Performance is the lifeblood of my universe. It is the connective tissue between me and everybody else. It used to be an outlet to escape my own skin, step into another character, let go of the anxieties and hang-ups of my own life, and just be somebody else. Nowadays, I use performance for quite the opposite. My presence on the stage is the most authentic, direct way of showing the world who I am. When I am on stage, I feel alive, a visible beacon of queerness, demanding to be seen, to be recognised for who and what I am. Quick story time. Shortly after I came out as trans, I performed in a week-long run of a theatrical fringe production. I was reprising the role of a character I had played in a shorter version of the play a year before. It was, honestly, a role I was honoured to get to come back to. The play was a touching, thoughtful exploration of the transformation of grief over time, and the toll that it takes on a family. The experience of performing in that production, however, almost completely destroyed my love of acting. Afterwards, it took me 2 years to regain my confidence and get back on stage. Even though at the time I had only very recently come out as trans, the switch had been flipped, and I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I was not, and never truly had been, a man. So to go out on stage every night to communicate to an audience that for the next hour and a half they had to perceive me as a man, it felt wrong on a fundamental level. There's a lot to dig into here, more than this already extensive script is capable of containing, but one question jumps out in particular. Why did it feel so wrong? The whole conceit of acting is pretending to be someone you aren't, so what if I'm not a man? I'm not a murderer either, but that hasn't stopped me from stabbing a guy with a fake knife in the past. Looking back, I think the uncomfortableness stemmed from the fear that when I stepped off of the stage, I would still be seen as a man, that my gender in the play wasn't part of the performance, that my gender, in any way, wouldn't be considered performance. I am, in many ways, a gender abolitionist. It should come as no surprise that, as a non-binary person, in my idea of a perfect society, we would have true abstraction between sex and gender. But I'd also go a step further. Gender currently functions and thrives as a product of itself, as a systemic construct built into the fabric of our society. It justifies its own existence. Yes, people like gender, but they mostly hold on to the concept of it as a safety blanket for their identity. It's something I've done myself. It's why I still list she in the pronouns I use. It's why in the early days of my transition, I leant more towards a binary trans model of gender. We live in a society where gender is so ingrained into every aspect of our life, sometimes we need to cling to an identity that is already recognised to feel recognisable in ourselves. But sometimes we owe it to ourselves and to the world around us to break those expected moulds of identity, to truly be us without following the rulebook. In Gender Trouble, Feminism and the Subversion of Identity, Judith Butler wrote,
If gender attributes and acts, the various ways in which a body shows or produces its cultural signification are performative, then there is no pre-existing identity by which an act or attribute might be measured. There would be no true or false, real or distorted acts of gender, and the postulation of a true gender identity would be revealed as a regulatory fiction. That gender reality is created through sustained social performances means that the very notions of an essential sex and a true or abiding masculinity or femininity are also constituted as part of the strategy that conceals gender's performative character and the performative possibilities for proliferating gender configurations outside the restricting frames of masculinist domination and compulsory heterosexuality.
How beloved Judith there, clear and concise as ever. But their words ring true. Gender holds us back. It is all just a performance, a face we show to the world so that it will know how we wish to be treated by the systems already put in place. Flawed systems that, while built around the perspectives of the majority, still leave many unaccounted for. Gender nonconformity pushes back against these systems, refuses to play a rigged game. In this way, trans existence is rebellion. And what's this, I hear you ask?
Well, that's all well and good harping on about gender being a social construct, but what about sex? Can you truly deny the reality of your own sex? What kind of cloud cuckoo lander make-believe Mary are you? What about sexual dimorphism?
Well, straw man I just made up. That is a very good question. Personally, I would argue that while sex is indeed biological, the sexual binary is yet another social construct. There's no such thing as a fish. As humans, we create arbitrary categorizations to make the most sense of life that we can. But none of these are absolute set-in-stone facts. We just make best-guess presumptions based on the available data at the time. That's what science is. To believe the sexual binary to be an undeniable truth is, to my mind, wrong-headed at best. To go back to our good friend Judith on the subject.
If the immutable character of sex is contested, perhaps this construct called sex is as culturally constructed as gender. Indeed, perhaps it was always already gender, with the consequence that the distinction between sex and gender turns out to be no distinction at all.
Oh. While we're still on the subject of sex, I've got a joke for you. What's the difference between sex and gender? I didn't have gender with your dad last night. Oh, by the way, my dear family, if you are still watching, you might want to skip this chapter. Just go down to the description. There's timestamps for all the chapters in there. Yeah, just go on to the next one, please. Even though I'd still consider myself on the A spectrum, grey demisexual panromantic for all you asexuality nerds out there, my transness has definitely changed my perspective and relation to sex and sexuality. Prior to transition, I had been in relationships with men and women, but sex was always nothing more than an expected function of those relationships to me. Even after transitioning, my first few sexual encounters just felt wrong. They were sometimes enjoyable, but there was always this underlying feeling of fetishization. That my sexual partner wasn't able to view my body and my gender in the same way that I did. It was bad, unsettling, and at times actively dangerous. And it was always basically just an act of self-harm. The first time I was with another gender non-conforming person, however, it was above everything else validating, both of my identity and of my connection to my partner. It was the first time I'd ever felt truly seen in the bedroom. It wasn't even about the sex or the lust for me. It was the deep intimacy, the trust, the feeling of belonging in a moment, an overwhelming rightness to it all. Sex in this context has helped me come to terms with my body and gender in a way no amount of hormone therapy had before that. I could finally see who I was and who I've always been through the eyes of another person. All self-doubt left aside. It's funny that, despite being ace, my desire and requirement for sexual activity negligible, I would still attribute some of my sexual encounters to bringing me closer to a form of self-actualization. Queer sex is revolutionary. This chapter was only like 2 minutes long. It did not need this outfit change.
Trans rights are human rights! 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 Trans rights are human rights!
All I would say, as a parent as well, you worry about your children. And I worry about you. I worry about the path that you're on, not because of you, but because I think it's difficult because of other people, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's going to be a difficult... It's not going to be an easy life for you, I don't think. And consequently, I do worry about you. And how people will treat you, I suppose. And that's through no fault of your own, that's just other people. But I'm glad that you're happy, because really...
Diary entry, 25th February 2019, 1 week before starting social transition. You know what scares me the most about any of this? About all of this. I can't be a butterfly. Hide in a cocoon, pupate and come out fully formed. The person who I want to be when I am ready to be them. My transformation has to happen as a normal part of life, under the scrutiny of friends, family, colleagues and strangers. It's something that they'll see and always have seen. A permanent addition to their image of me. I'll always be someone to them who has gone through a process. They may try and hide it, to accept me as if I always have been. But they know. I know what I've been through, what I'll always be going through. This is what scares me the most. To become a butterfly without a cocoon. The trans experience, while it is one full of joy, it is also one of anger and of fear. There are times where it feels like every single day is an act of defiance, a constant fight just to justify your own existence. Every other week is a game of guessing which tabloid paper or media outlet is going to be publishing a hit piece on trans people. What bad news we'll be waking up to next. Being trans has, in no small part, radicalised me. Simply being trans is a radical action in and of itself. I personally have been verbally and physically abused by strangers in public spaces simply for existing as a gender non-conforming person. Leaving the house, going to social events can at times be a terrifying experience. And all being said and done, I really don't have it too bad. I'm one of the lucky ones. Being trans is an uphill battle against a world that clings to its idea of a gender binary, but also against yourself, against social programming and against self-doubt that has been bored into you since childhood. This fear, this uncertainty, my anger at an openly bigoted and transphobic government is something that has driven me into political activism, to both join and create queer activist groups, to protest inequality and injustice, to do everything I can to make life better for both myself, my trans peers, and everybody else who is struggling as a minority. My actions are often driven through fear, but they are my actions, and I choose to take that fear and channel it into positivity, to channel it into a will to change what we have to go through. I am scared, constantly. I am terrified. I am always looking at whatever shit our current government is throwing at us and wondering when I am going to have to flee the country for my own safety. This is my reality. It is terrifying. It is draining. It makes me so tired all of the time to constantly be thinking about where the next blow is coming to come from. I can't enjoy art anymore without looking up the creators of it to see whether they would try to deny my existence. But I wouldn't change any of this if it meant that I couldn't be who I am. If this is the price that I have to pay, that we have to pay, then I would gladly pay it. I just wish I didn't have to, and I hope someday we can live in a world where I don't. This video has been about my trans experience, and I have tried to keep things light throughout. I have tried to make it about the discovery and the joy of being trans, but all the time there is this horrible, horrible darkness. This creeping feeling that at any moment it could all vanish. With one bill going through Parliament, my government could take away my access to hormones. They could strip me of my identity, force me to detransition. This is something we are seeing happening over in America right now. And it could happen here too. So, this is the only bit of video which I'm doing completely unscripted. I am just speaking off the top of my head, and what I want to say more than anything is, if you are cis, if you are an ally, listen to trans people, elevate their voices, really, really hear what they are saying. When they say that they are scared, that they are frightened, don't hand wave it. Don't say it's not that bad, because it really is. But, like I said, it can get better, and every day, while I am still here, I am going to fight to make it better. And I know so many people who are doing that exact same thing. Whether it's in small ways or the big ways, there are so many brilliant, brilliant people, especially in the younger generation. The Zoomers coming up, they are incredible. They are at the forefront of social justice, and it makes my heart sing, and it gives me so much hope. So, if you take anything from this video, from my story and my transition, take hope. Take hope. There's a moment at the end of chapter 1 of Celeste that I want to talk about. If you were like me on your first time playing through Celeste, you're still learning the game at this point, and have something of a sense of pride of making it through to the end of the chapter. You come across a large stone memorial with the following text inscribed upon it. This memorial dedicated to those who perished on the climb. Those who perished on the climb. That is who, above all else, I made this video for. It's a video I've been wanting to make for almost as long as I've been on this wild adventure, but recent events have spurred me into action. In the past 2 months, there have been 2 absolutely heartbreaking news stories about young trans people losing their lives. Firstly, there was Brianna Jai, a 16-year-old from Cheshire who was brutally murdered on the 11th of February 2023 by 2 other teenagers. Then, a month later, on the 12th of March, Eda Knight, a Saudi Arabian woman, was driven to take her own life at the age of 23 after her parents coerced her into returning from the USA and detransitioning. This video is not just for these 2 individuals, but for every trans person who was robbed of the opportunity to live their truest life, who never got to write their own story, who had their happiness and their dignity stolen by a world that never accepted them, never understood them. I created this project out of a desire to spread understanding, hoping that by giving an intimate glimpse through the window of my own life, I may in some small way create greater recognition for all trans lives, which could lead to greater tolerance and in time to greater respect. And at the end of the day, isn't that all we truly want? To be respected for who we are, to be able to live as ourselves without fear. This memorial is dedicated to those who perished on the climb. May we never forget them. I'd like to close out this video with a poem, one of the first pieces I ever performed live. This is called Queer. I am queer. As implausible as it is for a person to be defined by a single word, I recognise myself in these 5 letters. Q-U-E-E-R. Queer is the strange. Queer is the other. Queer is rebellion. It is being dropped into a world that fights to reject you, holding fast against the waves that try to push you down to become part of a normative whole. Queer is a badge I wear every day, a self-congratulatory reminder that my existence is revolution and that my voice has significance. Before me, others were called queer, branded with it, a sigil of shame. Then the cruelty of this world killed them. The word now bristles with the rage of those injustices. Queer tells a story. It makes a declaration. In spite of what you say I should be, I will be me. To be anything else would be impossible. And so, I am the strange, the other, the queer, and I'm not going anywhere.
Hey everyone, it's Editing Evie here, just with a few final comments. I'd originally planned to release this video to coincide with Trans Day of Visibility, but deadlines are like dead names in this house. We refuse to acknowledge their existence. I'd like to thank everyone who participated in making this project a reality. To my friends and family for agreeing to let me interview them about myself, and for the support they have given me in my life. I'd also like to thank you, dear viewer, for seeing this video through to its conclusion, for listening to what I have to say. This is my first project of this nature, and it's very much been an experience of learning as I go. There's a lot that I want to take forward into future work, but making this video has given me the inspiration to do. Please, do the YouTube thing. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, drop a comment about what you enjoyed, say something insightful. And if you want to see more of this sort of thing from me, subscribe to EVMD. Once again, thank you so much for using your precious time to watch this weird little video of mine. Love and solidarity.
Surprise! Bet you thought this was all over. Sorry, it's not. You have to look at my sick face and listen to my sick voice for a couple more minutes probably. So as I've been putting the finishing touches to this video and preparing to upload it to YouTube, shit has once again hit the fan for trans people in the UK. Our government is currently looking at plans to amend the Equality Act to essentially redefine how the word sex is used in the law and remove all existing protections for trans people from the Equality Act. It's kind of terrifying. It's not fun. It's really not fun right now. What's even worse about this, though, is that the leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer of the Labour Party, has backed these plans and thinks that it is a great idea. So it truly feels like we've got nowhere to go on this. It's, for my money, the most openly hostile that both major political parties have been to trans people. It's really quite scary. So yeah, I couldn't post this video without mentioning something about this, and I have a small ask for you. If you go down to the description of this video, there is a link to a petition. If you are able to, please click on that link, sign the petition. It basically just means that this will be talked about in Parliament with our concerns being heard. I know it isn't much, and it's basically counting on the broken system to fix itself, but it's all the power we have, worryingly enough, outside of direct action, which I'm sure some will be happening soon. So yeah, thank you for watching again. Please, if you are able to sign that petition, do, and I will see you for the next video.